Welcome to full council meeting of the 29th of November. Just to say now we're back in the chamber, just to remind you that if you are going to speak, then please be standing to make your comments. So item 1, we have apologies for absence from councillors Hill, Holmes, Jones, Lilly, Morley, Ridgway and Stone. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. Just Councillor Emmons to add to that list, please.
Thank you. Any other apologies? If not, item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interests not already on their register of interests in any items on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Are there any? Councillor Liggett.
I'd like to declare an interest in items 7 and 15.
Thank you. Any other declarations? Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. There are 2 councillors who were present who haven't been recorded as being present at the October meeting, and they are councillors Lacey and councillor Strafford Stevenson. So they need to be amended and added to the list of attendees. Other than that, can we move please to approve that they are a true and accurate record? Councillor Birkin.
I'd like to make a comment about the fact that this last meeting that we had was very poor audibly for several of our colleagues. Notably, my colleague Councillor Jeff Lilly has asked me to speak about this, and I know there are other people who have difficulties. It's not particularly marked in the minutes, and I'm not sure how it could be specifically marked in the minutes, but I think it does need noting, hopefully as part of this meeting, that the sound quality was very, very poor. And that's made, I think that's one of the reasons that some of the people have not turned up today, but it's making it even more difficult to get on with these meetings and to process them and get involved in them properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Birkin. Those comments were made at the meeting. I know we don't take verbatim minutes, but because of the nature of how it could have affected people's ability to be included in the discussions and so on, I think perhaps there should be a record that those comments were made by Councillor Lilly in particular.
Thank you, Chair.
So with your agreement, can those be added to the minutes, please? Thank you. So if we could move to approving them, please, Councillor Dale.
Yeah, happy to move them, Chair.
A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Cupit. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? We have 1 abstention. Thank you. And those are carried. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. Since the last meeting of full council, the consort and I have represented the district at a number of events. These include the High Sheriff of Derbyshire's legal service at Derby Cathedral, the 769th Ilkeston Charter Fair, voluntary sector awards, and the unveiling of a memorial for animals in war at Homebrook Valley Park. We laid a wreath at Mill Lane on Remembrance Day in a service led by the civic chaplain, which was well supported by members and staff. We also attended a service in North East Derbyshire on Remembrance Sunday and laid a wreath on behalf of the district. We are looking forward to attending forthcoming festive events, such as 3 carol services, 2 Christmas concerts, and a partridge in a pear tree. Work has commenced on developing the action plan for partnership with Darmstadt Dieburg and correspondence undertaken with the Landrat. We have also progressed plans for Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. This includes action for the Queen's Canopy. The first tree is being planted officially tomorrow afternoon. Consideration has been given to the district community event planned for the 4th of June and a massed choirs event on the 5th of June. A district civic service is booked for the 22nd of May and designs for a legacy item being initiated. We have been asked to align our district celebrations with those planned by Her Majesty's Lord Lieutenant in the county. I am grateful to the parish councils who have responded positively to my request for donations to my appeal for Ashgate Hospice. Although everyone recognises the financial pressures on local government, it is acknowledged that the hospice makes a significant difference in North East Derbyshire. I wish to thank the following councils for their generosity: Barlow, Brampton, Calo, Eckington, Grassmore, Holy Moorside and Walton, Morton, North Wingfield, Sutton-cum-Duckmanton, Unston and Wessington. I understand a further 2 councils have pledged a donation. I am grateful to colleagues and staff who have supported fundraising events such as a peak performance concert, quiz night, and the successful Christmas fair at the Technique Stadium yesterday. I hope many of you will join with us at the Christmas concert at St. John's Church from 7:30 in the evening on the 10th of December. Your support makes a difference. Thank you. Item 5 then, leaders' announcements. Over to you, Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. I think I speak for all of us in highlighting the concern around the new COVID variant, Omicron. Clearly, it's important that we remain calm, but it's vital that we all consider at this time of year in particular what extra precautions we can take to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe. Wearing masks where appropriate, regular hand washing and being mindful of testing ourselves on a regular basis. Aside from the new variant, COVID rates in North East Derbyshire, and in particular in Claycross, Grassmore and the Homewood areas are fairly high at the moment. And while our vaccination rates are also among the highest in the county, and the county is among the highest in the country, the same 3 areas I've described there, so Claycross, Grassmore and Homewood, are notably a few percentage points behind the rest of the district in terms of vaccination rates, which may help to explain those higher rates of transmission. I therefore urge all residents to get vaccinated, if not already, and take up the opportunity for a booster jab at the appropriate time, particularly those residents in Claycross, Grassmore and Homewood, as I've discussed. Moving on to some good news, you may have already been aware that our Environmental Health Department have recently seized and crushed a Ford Transit van that had been involved in the fly tipping of some waste. I know that some opposition councillors here today have been so eager to claim credit for this that they'd practically have you believe they were driving the digger themselves, but it's actions, not words, that count. So I want to pay particular tribute to our environmental health officers who've worked extremely hard to make this happen. I sincerely hope that it acts as a deterrent to anyone thinking about fly tipping in our beautiful district, and I know Cabinet and officers are working hard on further deterrent measures. Members will be aware that work is progressing very well on the carbon reduction inspired renovation of Eckington swimming pool, and solar panels have recently been installed on the roof. We're still hopeful of reopening in time for Christmas. At Killarmarsh, the final contract has now been signed and the contract has officially started on site. I want to thank the officers from across the various teams within the council, including the leisure service, legal and estates, for working so hard to make this happen. And I think it's great evidence of a one-team approach in action. Following on from the success at Eckington, we've also submitted an application for a similar government grant to help decarbonise Dromfield Sports Centre. If successful, the project will include the use of heat pump technologies, solar panels on the roof and efficiencies within the plant room. It could save at least 193 tonnes of carbon emissions per year, the equivalent of taking 77 houses off the grid. Keeping with the subject of climate change, by carrying out improvements like those to our leisure centre, and by insulating around 400 homes in the district, we've managed to remove 892 tonnes of CO2, equivalent to removing nearly 200 cars from the road permanently. We've also recently relaunched our community action grants and eco schools grant scheme, and I'd urge local community groups and schools to visit our website to find out more about how to apply. Businesses can also apply for support and grants of up to £10,000 with the Vision Derbyshire Business Support Scheme. On the subject of Vision Derbyshire, I've continued to attend the leaders' meetings and progress has been made towards the formalisation of the working arrangements. I will therefore bring a more detailed update to the next meeting so Council can consider the issues in full. But in the meantime, this Council remains at the table to discuss the potential benefits, but hasn't formally signed up to anything as previously agreed. Members will also more than likely be aware of the government's announcement of county deals earlier this summer. While the details are fairly scant at this stage, with more expected in the forthcoming white paper, the government has been clear that they will consider any models of governance for the deal, and that it is very clearly not a vehicle for unitarisation, as some have claimed. Derbyshire County Council is working with Derby City Council as the two upper tier authorities who would hold responsibility and accountability for any deal to seek out a county deal from the government, but they've been very clear that this will be in collaboration with the district councils based on the Vision Derbyshire model. Again, I'll bring a more comprehensive update on the situation at the next full council. On behalf of our Member Development Working Group, I also just want to remind all members that you will now have received an email asking you to complete a short questionnaire. The purpose is for the Member Development Working Group to carry out a training needs analysis. What you tell the group in your answers will help shape the training and development programme for councillors right the way through to May 2023. There are three quick key questions that I would like you to answer. These are about what training you've had so far, what was good and bad about it, and going forward, what sort of training and on what topics would help you now. The working group wants to progress this quite quickly, and therefore they have a tight deadline of the 20th of December. So I'd ask that all members please try and complete the questionnaires and return them to governance by then. And hopefully that will enable the working group to make some real progress on training that will benefit all of us and also benefit the people that we represent. And finally, I just want to congratulate you, Chair, on your recent election as Chair of the North Derbyshire Magistrates Bench. It's a fantastic achievement. Very well done to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just let the applause die down.
That's right.
Thank you. Too late. So thank you. Item 6, public participation. No questions have been submitted under procedure rule number 8 for this meeting. So item 7 is the independent remuneration panel. So over to the Assistant Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Council is required to have an independent remuneration panel look at its members' allowances scheme every 4 years or so. In addition, the IRP will be asked to consider whether there should be a special responsibility allowance for the chair of licensing. The Council does not have a standing IRP or independent remuneration panel. The members have generally been from other public sectors and have been unpaid for their work. In February this year, following a Standards Committee report, unsuccessful efforts were made to appoint members to this panel. As these were unsuccessful, it is now proposed that each panel member be paid £200 for a full review of the members' allowances scheme at the Council, including the SRA for the chair of licensing. In addition, it's proposed that a permanent head of paid service delegation is given to ensure that the panel can be set up in a timely way. Happy to answer any question. The recommendations are on page 17. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? If not, we move to recommendations, please. A proposer. Thank you, Councillor Dale, and seconded by Councillor Cupit. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. So item 8, Treasury Management Update. Over to you, please, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. This report is an update on the Council's Treasury management activities for April to September, this year for Council to note. So April to September 2021. Appendix 1 details the current borrowing activity and the interest paid on external borrowing, as well as providing an update on the Council's investments and interests these generate. I ask Council to note this report and I'll move it unless there's any questions.
Any comments or questions? It's been moved. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Dale. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Item 9 then, the North East Derbyshire Local Plan for 2014 to 2034. Over to you, please, Councillor Cupit.
Thank you, Chair. So we hopefully all recognise that planning and setting a development plan is one of the most important things for our district, particularly given recent or indeed not so recent history. A local plan allows us to decide which areas should be used for housing or business, to plan infrastructure, and gives greater protection to the areas we want to keep as greenfields or spaces. Planning is always difficult and often a compromise. And since becoming your planning cabinet member over the last couple of years and as an administration, we've always tried to be open, accessible and transparent to residents and communities, even if it's not the result we want to hear. I have to be really honest that whatever happens today, we can't completely fix this. As cabinet member tabling this report and having worked to try to improve the issues within it extensively, I want to set the record straight on what we've been doing and set out where we find ourselves, the facts, the risks and the choice that we all have to make today. And then as a local councillor and ward member, I want to set out my views and rationale from that perspective, as again, that's something we all have to consider. As a new administration, we inherited a plan a decade in the making, which had taken so long it had led to the threat of government intervention. We've had a perfect storm of thousands of houses approved, most notably in the south, but also actually across the district, by speculative development and a lack of infrastructure planning associated with this. We also inherited greenbelt allocations in the north of the district, despite the persistence and success of residents, community groups and my Conservative colleagues to reduce that from several thousand homes allocated in the greenbelt at the start to a remaining 1,275 greenbelt allocations on submission, and now to less than half that and the 4 sites in the plan as it stands. A very difficult situation, but some progress nonetheless. On taking control of the council, we paused the plan, as we'd promised to do, to review the housing numbers and to try to remove the remaining greenbelt allocations. Over the following months, there was a significant amount of work done to review the situation, given that the plan was under examination and so part of a formal legal process, and that an interim report and judgment had been received. This led to correspondence with the independent inspector to see what options she would or wouldn't allow. What came back in summary was 2 options, and they were really only 2. Continue to make modifications and try to seek further changes from an inspector who was already allowing the removal of 2 greenbelt sites, or withdraw the plan from examination and start again, by choice or eventually by a slow default. I have to be clear to residents and members, amending was and is not an option. It's not about just substituting sites, as there's a strategy that underpins it and an evidence base that sits behind any plan. So amending at the stage we inherited is like a perilously stacked house of cards. To take the nearby example of Sheffield, apologies to them, you pull just 1 brick out and the whole plan falls and you go right back to the start. It's all interconnected. We have a duty to work with other councils and organisations. The evidence documents are interlinked. For instance, if you were to try to switch allocated sites or suggest a new settlement, that would represent a material change in the evidence base and a change in the plan strategy. That's then not compatible with the rest of the plan or with the documents that underpin it, such as economic, employment, population data, SHLARs, housing capacity forecasts, I could go on. And they all relate to one another. So if you change one, you then have to reassess them all. This cannot be done quickly. Other councils trying to accelerate new plans are being told and proving it will take at least 3 to 4 years, as there are statutory milestones or perhaps millstones. On looking at all the options, I want to reassure the Chamber and residents we did carefully consider them. We sought legal advice from some of the most experienced barristers, including a QC, and planning experts in the country. We spoke to ministers and MHCLG, as it then was. We spoke to PAS, the Planning Advisory Service, and even spoke to one of the heads of the Planning Inspectorate. And every single one came to the same conclusion. Amending the evidence base would not be possible within the current examination and would lead to the withdrawal of the plan. This means the choice was clear. Continue to make modifications to maintain the current weight of the plan and to properly get the Eckington and Colaston greenbelt sites out. And I really have to emphasise that those 2 greenbelt sites were not out of the plan when we inherited it. And ask the inspector to extend this further through that same logic or withdraw the plan. to move on to the option of starting again. I've covered the issue of the time it would take, but the most compelling concern for me is that we would have to reset the clock. That means the speculative development and allocations that have been built out over the last 7 years would no longer count towards our target, with the result that we would have to find sites for an additional 2,000 houses for a new plan period, also whilst losing greenfields and greenbelt, because greenbelt surrounds our most popular towns, to speculative development. If you don't believe me or two of the most experienced barristers in the country, believe other factual examples in Hatfield, Oxfordshire, Herefordshire, where greenbelt sites have been approved for housing on appeal. With that, and with regards specifically to the greenbelt allocations that remain in this plan in Killamarsh and Dromfield, as a point of principle, I fully agree we should never want to allocate sites on the greenbelt. I've spent a lot of time talking to residents and members, so I know the strength of feeling in this regard too. I share your frustration and upset at where we're at, but we have the evidence base from the previous administration's strategy and the inspector's interim and final judgment, which supports the release of these 4 remaining sites, and which would leave those 4 remaining sites we're trying to protect, as well as other greenbelt sites, vulnerable even if we withdrew the plan. So it's in the context of these competing issues, to be frank, what is a rock and a hard place, and the inability to start completely from a clean slate because of what's gone before, that we all have to make a choice on what we individually think is the best for the district today, and as a whole and on an area by area basis. To then spend a final couple of minutes with my local councillor perspective, as we all should too. There are sites in this plan I don't like and certainly wouldn't have allocated, from speculative permissions, which have been granted, to a couple of extras in settlement gaps, thanks to the previous administration. As I've said throughout this speech, we can't rewind the clock, and I really regret that. But we can stop the cycle of speculative development eating up our green fields in an unplanned and ad hoc manner. As a district and county councillor, living and representing Shirland Ward and all the villages within it, as well as Claycross, Tupton and Grassmore, the key discussion I've had with hundreds of my neighbours and residents is the amount of development we've faced and are facing on green fields that we have not been able to resist or plan for without a plan in place. We know that the risk of continued speculative development is real. There are applications right now in the planning system that would likely be ultimately approved if we don't have a plan. The most imminent of those is the threat of the 300 extra homes on Coop Lane, which I've been fighting against, and there would be many more that would follow it. Many more greenfields where developers have been refused in the past or are waiting to put in applications if the plan is not adopted, in Wessington, Shirland, and the gaps between Claycross, Tupton and Wingworth. Please don't think our 5-year housing supply or the default of the tilted balance and the MPPF would protect us, as it wouldn't. I don't even need to go out of district to find examples of this, as Dearlands Road, Williamthorpe Road, Narrowlees Lane and Coney Green are the devastating headline examples of this. For the last decade, it's been an awful roulette where the odds have been stacked against us. And as one of the local councillors for some of these residents, I've got a choice today, and it is a really imperfect choice, but it's a choice to end that. I couldn't go back to the communities I represent in the south of the district voting against this plan when I've worked so hard with them to fight these speculative applications. So in summary, there was no alternative, and it's a clear yes or no choice today, and that is a choice. Please don't say this administration had a choice to change other than to try through the main modifications. That was an entirely viable option, and the examples of recent intervention elsewhere in the country or the time taken to start again show the potential consequences of withdrawing. I don't want to build on Greenbelt as a matter of principle, and I respect those who take that stance, and I'll continue to work with my Conservative colleagues to try and protect and mitigate those sites, whatever happens today. But on balance, I personally have to be swayed by what I believe will happen in practice if the plan is not adopted, and so I move the recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair, on a factual basis as far as you can permit during the debate, or I'll try and sort of round as many up in my closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Councillor Barker.
Oh, sorry. Don't stand up. Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte, for that. So we have got a chance now to 2.5 years to finally vote on this local plan. In 2019, I think your group told the people in North East Derbyshire that you would pause the local plan and allow it to be rewritten because in your words or somebody's words, it was flawed. You told them that there are too many houses were going to be built in the wrong place. Indeed, as far as I understand,
you were elected on a promise to remove the greenbelt sites from this local plan. Before going any further, though, I'd like to put on record, put the record straight on some of the misconceptions that have been bandied about. Firstly, I'd like to make it crystal clear that the last administration, I suppose, followed government advice in drawing up this local plan. We followed the advice of our excellent planning team and even external consultants when we put the plan together. I'll accept that the process did take a long time, but there were good valid reasons for this, mostly around the extensive consultations that had to be done and the time period that took up. The figure of 6,600 houses has been used, and it was arrived at for a valid reason. Members of your group on the steering group at the time voted to support that figure. Any number significantly less than that had serious consequences for the district, but you forget to tell folks that. Secondly, the decision to conduct a review and build in the greenbelt was done for one reason and one reason only. It was the logical consequence of your government's planning policies. That's a government whose mantra is build, 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 and which wanted to change the law to make it easier for developers to gain planning permission. We were told very clearly and on several occasions that the cross-party local plan steering group that submitting a local plan without undertaking a greenbelt review would not have been a realistic option. And you've now come back to this council with a plan endorsed by the planning inspector that includes building those 6,600 properties and allows building on the greenbelt. If anyone thinks that we started the greenbelt review as some sort of political kamikaze, I think I'd ask you to think again. We didn't voluntarily do that. Many of you would have known or should have known these facts from the outset, and yet you made promises and raised expectations that you are now having to break. The cross-party steering group has only met a couple of times since the election, thus excluding others from that process. This leads me to the conclusion that this plan is now very much your plan. To be honest, I'm personally struggling to support it, even after reading the legal advice. Maybe if the steering group had met more often, and some of the issues that we face today could have been avoided. Local plans split groups. I'm sure you're finding that out. Some of us have seen the minutes from Darmstadt Town Council and know how members of that council voted. We also know that your Kilmarsh members have said and the promises they've made. So either some of the members are saying different things at different meetings, or your group is split on this issue. Hardly surprising, since you're about to break the promises you made to the people of Dromfield and Kilmarsh. You want others to vote for this plan and to be part of that deception. So I, in good conscience, can't do that. Had you used the steering group to build a cross-party consensus, things could have been different, but you didn't. So I am minded to abstain on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Barker has just said. I think for our group, it's a matter of principle. Our group stood at the 2019 election opposing the local plan that was in existence then. The Conservative group did. Your leaflet said it. Your press releases said it. You opposed this local plan from the start, and you told residents that you did not support it. 2.5 years later, you're now trying to convince us to support it with you. Like Nigel said, it's a trap. You're doing it because you've misled residents, and you have no other choice now than to accept this bad local plan because you've been messing around for 2.5 years. That's how long it's been. It feels like yesterday, but you got control 2.5 years ago. Now, in all of that time, you could have looked at amending the local plan. Whether that's possible now is a different story. But you had the time 2.5 years ago. Councillor Cupid's just said to rewrite a full local plan from scratch is 4 years. Well, if we've got 2.5 years just to make some amendments to the existing local plan, I think the planning team here and the inspector could have changed that evidence base that underpinned the local plan. What you're doing now is misleading people. I've seen statements from Councillor Dale online where he's suggesting that it's the inspector that changes the local plan. That is not true. The council submit a local plan, the inspector checks it based on the national planning policy framework. To go around telling people that you're being forced to have this local plan is misleading everybody, especially Kilmarsh and Dronfield residents, because that's where the Conservative group were most vocal. I will not be supporting this local plan today. And if any of the Conservative group do support this local plan today, you seriously need to consider your position, because you have lied to people. You told people you oppose this local plan, and you cannot honestly be now voting for it today. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments or questions? Count. Right, let me just this right now. So, Councillor Lacey.
Right, okay. This was a last minute thing for me to present this for a simple reason. There was going to be a group of residents asking questions and were told they couldn't because they needed to give 12 days notice. Now, they couldn't give 12 days notice for the simple reason the agenda only come out a week before. So maybe we should change our policy there. Okay, this all refers to site KL1 and drainage and flooding. Apart from the main route of Sheffield Road, Kilmarsh has two access routes that are prone to flooding. This is Spinkhill Road and Green Lane. I've sent all councillors a couple of photographs of a couple of occasions where this happened. There's a culvert for the rainwater to Park Brook via some detention ponds on the site. The site has a 43-metre drop from northeast to southwest and causes flooding to the site in periods of sustained rain, which now occur more regularly. It's now no longer now a 100-year event. And the removal of most of the wildflowers in the meadow will deny the current grassland's ability to absorb excess water. And I don't believe permeable materials will be used on the development. To remove most of the wildflower meadows will deny the current grasslands the ability to absorb excess water, and this will lead to soil instability due to the removal of the complex structure of the wildflowers which provide current stability. I believe these issues contravene SDC 11, paragraphs 1C and 2D, that the site should be removed from the plan. That is it.
Thank you. Councillor Cornwell.
Yes, thank you very much. Over the last few years, I'm the district councillor for Heath and Homewood. Over the last few years in Homewood, we've seen 5 developments totaling 1,100 properties, mostly in the last 2.5 years. Our population has gone from 3,900 and has almost doubled to 6,000 people. Now, I've been telling people in Homewood that we are unlikely to manage to stop any of these developments, even if we do manage to get to appeal, and we did manage to get to appeal for several of them. The reason we can't stop them is because we've got no local plan, and the officers have absolutely no grounds to stop it. So I'm absolutely dismayed that this local plan has been sat with you guys for 2.5 years. And what seems to be very little changes, possibly to protect areas where my Conservative colleagues represent. So Heath and Homewood have received the brunt of the lack of a local plan. We're no longer Homewood, but we're practically connected to Claycross, North Wingfield and Temple Normanton. And we could be actually renamed as Clay North Woodton, because there has been no local plan. So I have absolutely no choice but to vote for this, because I have to have every little bit of hope that we can save whatever land is left in Homewood and give our officers the chance to stop any new development. I don't necessarily want to vote for it. I have no choice to protect Homewood.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Ruff.
Thank you, Chair. It is my intent to support the local plan before us today. This plan is long overdue. On that, I'm sure we can all agree. And although not perfect, and it never could be with such a diverse district with differing needs from hamlets to villages, towns, this plan is the only one before us today. We are all aware of the challenges that face the district to meet its housing provision. And today, North East can demonstrate that not only have we met the number, but we have in fact exceeded it. Unfortunately, it has to be said, it is the southern part of the district that has borne the brunt of the major developments. Wingworth alone, having over 1,600 new homes, not including infill sites. By not backing the local plan before us today, we could potentially open the floodgates for yet more speculative development across the whole district. And this would include all Greenbelt sites. I would urge particularly all southern members to support this plan. And I do take exception to be called a liar. I have never had given to my residents the fact that I would not protect them from development. This is one of the things I stood originally as a councillor, and I do take exception to that. With this in mind, I shall be seconding this recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rough. Councillor Clough.
Thank you, Chair. My comments today relate to policies SS1 and SS2. Now that 2.5 sites at Eckington, Colaston and Dronfield have been quite rightly removed from the allocations, Killamarsh is left with the largest allocation of dwellings amongst all those towns in Tier 1 and 2. In the north of the district, Killamarsh's allocation of a total of 560 dwellings should be compared with the total allocations of Dronfield and Eckington combined, which is 516. Killamarsh has about 11,000 residents, whereas Dronfield and Eckington, between them, have about 35,000 residents. Additionally, Killamarsh has the smallest amount of green belt, the least amount of green space per head of population, and the poorest infrastructure, according to figures within the plan. How is this fair, reasonable and proportionate to reflect Killamarsh's position in the settlement hierarchy and accord with policies SS1 and SS2? I don't believe this plan delivers for Killamarsh or the district as a whole, and therefore I will be voting against. Can I ask that my vote is logged, is registered, please?
Thank you. Can you just remind some councillors still have microphones on? So,
Oh, sorry.
thank you, because it creates two of my voice and you don't want that. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Potts and then Councillor Hancock.
Pending here. Thank you, Chair, for having the opportunity to speak. Residents in Killamarsh, as well as being concerned about adding to an already congested village road system, about an inadequate infrastructure, about worsening an existing flooding issue, and about a lack of public transport, are also concerned about the environmental effects of opening up development on our green belt as proposed in this plan before us today. The environmental and ecological impact resulting from the development of the Westhorpe KL1 site in the plan would be significantly damaging. This would include habitat loss, pollution from dust spoils and runoff, fragmentation or isolation of habitats, and disturbance, injury, and possible destruction of fauna. Of the 14 hedgerows on the site, 5 are judged to be ecologically important under the 1997 hedgerows regulations. Development of this site will require the removal, whole or in part, of virtually all 14 hedgerows, and 8 mature trees will also be felled. There have been 66 species of bird recorded as using the site, 15 of which are on the RSPB red list. 5 species of bat use the site, and great crested newts are also believed to be on the site. It is appreciated that while some of the damage could be ameliorated, the overall impact would be ecologically destructive and would fall short of this council's own policies, namely policy SDC2, trees, woodland and hedgerows, and policy SDC4, the biodiversity and geodiversity policy. There is a strong public opinion in Killamarsh that the environmental and ecological well-being of Killamarsh's green belt KL1 site should not be sacrificed as proposed in this plan. I was elected to fight development on this site, and I will vote accordingly today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I've spent 2 terms now arguing that the local plan that we've had before us is not appropriate for North East Derbyshire. My opinion hasn't altered. I am going to actually correct a few issues here, and I would thank Councillor Cupid for her very Freudian slip earlier when she was speaking and she mentioned Nethermore Road. Nethermore Road is the perfect example of speculative development that was kicked out and was upheld at appeal because it simply wasn't there. So to use the threat of speculative development is misleading the public and everyone in this room. We can oppose where we have strong rights to do so. And this council has had almost 3 years to have set the ball rolling on an alternative local plan. We didn't have to go with main modifications. We could have restarted the clock. We could have gone and we could have been a hell of a long way down that road right now and fighting for actually to protect the environment that we have. I can't support it. I mean, even the barrister's report, which has been used, I presume, as an attempt to convince people, actually says that our existing local plan does still carry weight. It may be an old policy, it may have reduced weight, but it does still carry weight. And I think that the most appropriate thing is, and yes, we have gone 2.5 years down the line, it is still to reject this local plan and look at an alternative. And I would ask all members to consider that because this is not in the district's best interest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just let you know where I am with the list. I've got Councillor Cooper next, then I'm going to Councillor Tate, and Angelique Foster, and then Councillor Drabble, then Councillor Platts. So Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. As a planning member on this council, I find it increasingly difficult with no up-to-date local plan. Indeed, I find it very difficult. In fact, some days I find it like a joiner going out to work with no tools, only to look up to find the developers have stolen them all. I will be supporting this today, not because I think it's exactly the right thing, but I think because of what's gone before and the history, I think it's the only thing that we can do consciously today to try and make things somewhere near right. I represent Pilsley, Morton and Stretton, and Pilsley and Morton in particular have had a lot of development over the last few years. And I'm just very concerned that if we don't accept this today, that's just going to continue and continue, and it's going to be once again the south of the district that's going to suffer the most. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on the local plan. I stand here today as a parent, resident, town and district councillor, who this local plan greatly affects. Since the plan emerged, I've been fighting against it with some but all councillors here in this room today. I stood beside these councillors and promised to fight a local plan which included building on Greenbelt. My position on the local plan has not changed. You will hear other councillors here today speaking against and for this local plan, and they themselves are between a rock and a hard place, as I'm sure you will hear. Some might say there are risks of starting again, but the one thing I do know is that Greenbelt protects itself from being developed. And by approving this local plan and the removal of land from Greenbelt, that protection is lost forever. Let's not forget the 4,000 signatures submitted to this very council to save the Greenbelt. That is 4,000 Dronfield residents who felt so strongly about losing the Greenbelt, they started a petition. I'd also like to take this opportunity to quote a councillor from across the room and share their concerns when speaking about a plan application which sought to build on Greenbelt on the 9th of February this year. And I quote Councillor Reader, I have real concern about what is happening in Greenbelt. We want to protect the Greenbelt to stop things from sprawling out. I hope that Councillor Reader stands by her words in that planning meeting here today, as voting against this local plan would also protect the Greenbelt and stop things from sprawling out. I would also like to take this opportunity to ask for my vote to be recorded. I believe this local plan does not benefit the residents in my ward, which I'm here representing today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Angelique Foster.
Thank you. Before I start, just to clarify something, I've been a councillor for North East Derbyshire district since 2011, and at the time it was under Labour. We didn't have a local plan then, and it had been in the hands of Labour for many, many years, and they failed to bring us a proper local plan. We've had only 2.5 years to work on this plan. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Dronfield South residents. I've been their councillor for 11 years, but also for all other Dronfield residents as Dronfield Town Council leader, which I've been for the last 6 years. As such, I've pledged many times that I would fight to protect our Greenbelt. I promised I would fight this local plan until all our Greenbelt sites were removed from the plan. I was at the forefront of the campaign against the local plan when it was first presented. In fact, even before that, I had made my views very clear on behalf of residents. And I'd like to clarify as well that nowhere, at no time in Dronfield, have I ever seen any Lib Dem councillors or members of the parties joining us in that fight, ever, none of them. So it's very good to be stood here and trying to speak against it and making political points. We never had any help whatsoever from the Lib Dems in Dronfield. I'd like that minuted, please. I've worked closely for many years with residents, community groups, and my fellow councillors to object to this plan while it was under Labour. And since then, I participated in the public inquiry meetings and helped coordinate responses. And I carried on in the same way during the last consultations back in 2020. I don't think anybody can be in any doubt about my position today. I don't expect that anything I say today will change your mind. Every councillor here will have come today knowing full well which way they will vote, because all the information on this plan has been available to all of us for many, many months. So I will not go into the details of why I will vote against this plan, because these have been put forward many times over via various forums. Just a couple of points. The voice of Dronfield residents has been loud and clear. They trust us that we will protect our green belt at all costs. In 2019, Dronfield Town Council presented its neighbourhood plan, voted through by referendum and recognised and made by this very council. In it, residents made it very clear that they wanted the local green belt preserved and protected, and they put forward evidence for the reasons why. Two significant greenbelt sites remain in the plan. The greenbelt site DR1 and DR3, which are key greenbelt sites that still fulfill all greenbelt criteria. And it has been suggested earlier, actually, that those fields elsewhere in the district that do not currently have greenbelt protection are at risk if we don't give up those greenbelt sites. It does not make sense to me. DR1 has even further been assessed for flood risk most recently, following the issues faced by unstoned properties a couple of years ago. This assessment shows that any development on that land will cause significant further flooding risk to those same unstoned properties. Dronfield Town Council has provided a number of alternative sites, which again were supported by residents. Still, greenbelt sites are being prioritised, and we all know that's because, in most part, they are easier to develop for developers. We've also been told that rejecting the plan today presents a number of risks. I refer to the barrister's report received. But let's take example of Amber Valley Borough Council, for example, where Amber Valley councillors made the very decision to scrap their local plan a couple of years ago, because in their view, it put too much green belts up for development. Now, their new plan contains much less green belt sites than originally. The inspector has been provided with ample evidence
half a minute left, Councillor,
to show that our greenbelt sites should remain protected. But neither the inspector nor the barrister are making the decision today. Every single councillor here are making the decision. and they should vote to protect our green belt at all costs. I will vote against the plan today, and it is because it is a matter of conscience that I want the public to know that. I would like my personal vote to be minuted, and I believe there are rules in the Constitution that allow for that. So I'd like my vote to be recorded.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Drabble.
Thank you, Chair. Kilmarsh, like other areas in the northeast Derbyshire district, has poor air quality, mostly caused by the proximity of the 8 lanes of M1 motorway shown in the map on page 24 of the scoping report for the sustainability appraisal of the northeast Derbyshire core strategy published in February 2012. This will have worsened since this due to the 8 lanes of smart motorway that are now fully operational and have been since April 2016. The report was in 2012. Site KL1 is less than a mile away from the M1 and KL2 is even closer, with KL1 being more than 2 kilometres from the facilities of Kilmarsh, and site KL2 is proposed at the furthest northern point of Kilmarsh. The sustainability appraisal of the plan states that site KL1 will engender a significant increase in greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, KL1 site contains contaminated soil, much of which will have to be taken away by lorries or extracted and used as the base for the roadways. This will inevitably cause dust to fall on the houses, driveways and roads surrounding the site, with some of the contamination, including polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, potentially cancer-causing. There has not been an air quality assessment on this site, and in my view, there should have been. I believe that the development of this site will be both dangerous to Kilmarsh residents, not just at a local site level, and contrary to policy SDC 13 paragraphs 1 and 2 and paragraph 4 in respect of the lack of a full air quality assessment. Why has this unsuitable site been included in the allocations? And can I also request for my vote to be noted, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Platts.
My feedback sort of relates to sustainability around the local plan, particularly Kilmarsh. The 2 sites proposed for removal from the green belt in Kilmarsh do not meet any of the 3 requirements under paragraph 79 of the 2012 National Planning Policy Framework. In terms of economic value, there are 2 protected employment sites available in Kilmarsh, both of which are unattractive to developers. Both have been protected sites since the last local plan and the Aspinall Verde Employment Sites Review 2017, which placed both sites in the red category, stating that they would not be available for 10 years and would need significant investment to become viable. The sites are located far away from the town centre and would need travel by car to access services. Contrary to policy SS1, i.e. where services and facilities are accessible by foot, cycle or public transport with reduced reliance on the private car. The social element of sustainability requires that a sufficient number and range of homes will be provided, including affordable homes. The viability issues in respect of site KL1 is highly unlikely to reach 20%, perhaps even any affordable home provision, due to massive remediation costs required by the site's former mining legacy. The environment and ecology of the site will be damaged irreparably by this development, as evidenced by a report from Access Ecology stating that there will be significant damage caused to ecology at the site location. This will include habitat loss, disturbance and damage to habitats, pollution from dust, spoil and runoffs, fragmentation and isolation of habitats and disturbance, and injury or death to fauna. Some of the effects can be ameliorated, but by no means all. The damage will be permanent and surely contravenes the 2012 National Planning Policy Framework and Policy SD4, which requires the enhancement of all sites of biogeodiversity. Site KL2 also has very similar issues to Site KL1. You know, it begs the question why these sites, particularly KL1, still left in the local plan. Overall, I can't in good conscience support the plan. Our constituents in our area have pressed against this for many years now, many years. And as such, I won't be voting for the plan. And again, I would like that logging also in the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for this opportunity to speak on this one. I wasn't going to, but having heard some of the discussion, I thought I'd better put my tuppence worth in. The local plan has always caused me, or the lack of a local plan especially, has always caused me some discomfort locally for a number of reasons. The issue for me isn't the local plan per se, but I do accept that there are arguments around the green belt that some parts of our community in North East Derbyshire have. The issue for me is that not having a local plan leaves the door open to speculative development, and we have seen a considerable amount of that in our communities, and most especially in around my own village of Wessington, but also in places like Sheffield, and the impacts in Wingerworth, in particular in my ward, have been very significant. So right across my division as a county councillor, those issues have rung really loud and hard for us. So the speculative building over the last 10 years has done more damage to our towns and villages, I think, and certainly my parts, and no doubt in other elected members' parts of North East Derbyshire, than perhaps doing the local plan itself. The local plan means there will be rocks and hard places, as it's been described, for all of us. But no local plan means greater impacts and more losers than winners, I think, across our communities. I'll be supporting it, albeit reluctantly, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by addressing some of the points made by Councillor Barker and the Lib Dems. I think that Labour's position, if Labour are abstaining, is a complete abdication of responsibility. Residents won't forget that. You may say that about what the Conservatives are doing today, but residents won't forget your involvement in this plan. You had the last plan was adopted in 2005. You had 14 years. You had 14 years to adopt a local plan, and you failed at every hurdle. And the speculative development that we've heard about is a direct result of not having a local plan in place. We've had thousands of homes approved in the south, in particular, as a result of not having that plan in place. And it's no use blaming it on government guidelines or extensive consultations. You had 14 years. You had the ability to set out a better plan from the outset. And my biggest single regret is that the elections didn't happen in 2018, when we could have taken control and we could have more easily started the plan again, having not had the examination to happen in the meantime. In terms of the Lib Dems, I mean, this is just classic political bandwagon jumping. I have to ask myself, where were you during all the consultations in Dronfield? Did you even submit a response to the latest consultation?
Point of order, Chair, because Councillor Foster said this earlier, and I would like to correct both of them. We were heavily involved. In fact, I weren't even elected then. Councillor Hancock was actually at
What point of order are you actually referring to?
I think both need to correct the statements because they're misleading people again.
There's no point of order raised there. Can we?
I think it's absolutely fitting that the Lib Dems think there's an extremely simple solution to all of this, and actually it shows how little they understand the planning process. And their only alternative was a huge new development in the Greenbelt to the rural west of the district. How on earth would that help to protect the Greenbelt? How on earth would that be sustainable? It's just absolutely ridiculous that they can even suggest that their alternative was better. I think from my perspective, and for me, this is one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make as a councillor. But it's ultimately what we're elected to do. And in saying that, I'd start by saying that I fully respect the decision of all colleagues to arrive at different conclusions on this. And that's why I think it's important that the Conservative group is having a free vote. We all have to be guided by our own views and the interpretation of the facts before us. So I can only speak to the situation as I see it. Now, alongside local residents and community groups and fellow councillors, I've played an important role in the campaign to protect the Greenbelt over the past 4 years since the first draft was put forward in 2017. Some of the actions fellow colleagues have already outlined: organising public meetings, delivering leaflets, collecting petition signatures, holding advice surgeries, supporting residents in what say in their own consultation responses, attending the examination sessions. And as an administration since 2019, no stone has been unturned in trying to find a way forward to remove the remaining Greenbelt sites without putting the rest of the Greenbelt, and particularly those sites already removed from the plan, back at risk. The simple fact for me is that the plan is at too late of a stage in a heavily legally regulated process where changes cannot be achieved without risking what the barrister highlights in the appendix. It's a matter of deep regret that we haven't been able to find a way of successfully and safely removing the Greenbelt allocations, but I know that we've done everything within our power to try. Ultimately, it's down to all members to come down on a risk-based judgment from my perspective. Clearly, there are risks in voting for the plan, not least that those sites allocated are then highly likely to face development. But for me, the risks of not adopting a plan are too significant to ignore. The point that Councillor Cupit has already made around the 2,000 additional houses by resetting the clock we'd have to find, I fail to see how we would do that without further encroachment on the Greenbelt. There would also be the issue of the duty to cooperate. We would have to factor in with Sheffield still formulating its local plan. We'd face an increased risk of speculative development across the district. And from what I read of the barrister's appendix, the Greenbelt itself would not necessarily be safe. In fact, my own view is that the sites currently allocated, as sad as I am to say it, the inspector has found that the exceptional circumstances have been met in those cases, and I think that they would be extremely difficult to defend at appeal. But I'm also concerned that we'll face more applications on the Greenbelt due to how out of date the plan would become. And while clearly we'd do everything as a council we could to stop them, I couldn't guarantee to residents that we'd be successful. And I think that prospect of going backwards in terms of what we've achieved on the Greenbelt is my biggest fear. Other councillors clearly will have a different interpretation of those risks, and that is completely for them to come to. But it's fundamentally a decision around those risks. And while it pains me to vote for a plan which contains sites that I've had so much effort in trying to fight, I cannot ignore what I feel are the very significant risks we face. And for that reason, I'll be voting for the recommendation. It's not a decision I take lightly, and I've very carefully considered all of the issues.
Thank you, Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Reader.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't also going to speak today, but I think Councillor Tate's put me in the position where I have to. I absolutely stand by those comments. And I think you need to understand that everybody on this side of the chamber, it's been sort of led to this belief that Labour want to build in Greenbelt, and we absolutely don't want to build in Greenbelt. We were faced with a decision of making a plan. We did that hand on heart, I believe, with the guidance that was put forward for us, which is government guidance. I don't know what guidance you would be using, but we use the guidance that's presented to us on this side of the chamber. And that is what we truly did. And also the respect for the officers who put the time and the hours in to advise us on the best course of action. And they advised us on what we had to do. So absolutely everybody on this side of the chamber followed the guidance that we were given. So yes, it is a difficult decision. So on this side of the chamber, we're also taking a free vote because we understand that there are going to be communities upset by this plan. There are going to be councillors, like in my ward in the south, that have been absolutely decimated with building. Clay Lane, Coop Lane, it's absolutely atrocious what's happening with those sites. And I've been there fighting for those sites to be saved. I've spoken on the Clay Lane site. I've been up and down Coop Lane with Councillor Rouse. Spent a full day down there talking to residents down there. We don't want building down there. And we'll continue to fight like that for those residents there. So this side of the chamber will absolutely be taking a free vote in what they truly believe is the best vote for their community.
Thank you, Councillor Reader. Councillor Rennick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm also finding this a very difficult vote. I represent Eckington, Killarmarsh and Colaston. I was hugely delighted that after all the work, particularly of Councillor Kenyon attending the committee at the time, we removed Colaston and Eckington. But now I find myself as a Killarmarsh County Councillor, not quite successful, which is hugely disappointing. The heavy heart, I will be voting for this, but just wanted to point out that the local plan is not the same as planning permission being granted. And I hope through the planning process and the planning committee that anything that's from the Killarmarsh end is scrutinised and make sure that we for all the reasons people have raised, I'm surprised it's still in there, And we need to redouble our efforts, depending on the outcome of this vote today, to make sure that sites we're not happy with, we fight all those sites tooth and nail.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. I'd just like to pick up on, well, page 35, appendix number 1. With any residents reading this could be concerned with the independent legal advice on the risks of not adopting the local plan from cornerstone barristers. Now, anyone reading it may argue that what are the risks of adopting a local plan, and why is there just been, well, they could see it as a bit of a one-sided view in a way. Should we not have another barrister's report saying what are the risks of adopting the local plan? We've heard that with a local plan, it may minimise appeals, but even were we minded to vote for this, there's nothing to stop any appeals coming forward, including on the 2 sites that have already been withdrawn from the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I'm sure Councillor Cupit will respond to that question in a summing up. Councillor Mark Foster.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to make 2 things very clear before I start. First one is I'm not questioning anyone else's integrity here, so I'll let that sink in. Second one is I want to ask that my own vote be recorded under Rule 14.5, as others have said, of the Constitution, and that is certainly not a request for a full recorded vote. It's a request for my vote to be recorded for the record. Most people have already heard me speak on the local plan before, so none of this will be a surprise. I'm sure you've heard all of this before. My views remain the same. I was against this plan in opposition during the last election, when we took control of the council, and right up to this final point. At every turn and every opportunity, I've advocated scrapping the plan. Every time, without a fail, and you've all heard me say it. Over the years, I've spoken to many residents on the door, in village halls, at Greenbelt residents' meetings, in the street collecting signatures for the petition with over 4,500 signatures. Their voice of all these people, it was overwhelmingly against building on the Greenbelt and against this local plan. And let's not get this mixed up here. These are the same thing. The plan takes land out of the Greenbelt so you can build on it. We understand that. I know that. Residents know that. And certainly developers know about that. So if you look at the website, and this is pertaining to Killamarsh, of Urban Town Planning, they've already requested through the local plan that land at Westhorpe, Killamarsh, be removed from the Greenbelt so that Arworth Estates can build 400 houses on it. It's an oven-ready plan for Killamarsh, and it's exactly the same for Dronfield. It's exactly the same. So this is not a done deal. Today is our final vote. This is it today. Yeah. It is, however, a done deal after today if this plan goes through. Now, I'm on the planning committee, and we all know when these planning applications come in, it will say on the application that the council already have effectively given approval based on the local plan. That's what it will say. So residents will come and talk about doctor's appointments and school places like they usually do, and we'll listen to them. But these aren't taken into account. A local councillor might do a survey and say, I'm against this, and we'll fight this particular one. And I know, sorry, Councillor, I think you mentioned this earlier, so my apologies, it's opposite to what you've said. But they'll come and talk about increased traffic and can we have some 106 money. But none of this will matter because our planning department will be recommending approval based on this local plan. That's what it will come through as. It will be based on this local plan that we're voting on today. So fighting the planning committee is not going to happen. I'll try, but that's if I'm still on the planning committee. That's why I will not vote for the local plan, and it is not supported, as it's not supported by residents. I do not support building on Greenbelt land. Never have done and never will. I don't mind the accusations from the Lib Dems. I don't mind them one bit because they're not true. They're not. So I don't mind hearing them at all.
And lastly, I've asked that my own individual vote be minuted so that residents know that I've listened to them. This listening council business, I'm a listening councillor and they've heard, and I've heard them. And I want them in that camera to know that I've heard them and I'm voting this way because of that. The last thing I'd say, and I'd add to this, because this is rewritten, and I normally do speak off the cuff, but I've written this before. What I would say is this: when we look at, people look at this from the outside, they'll see that our party's split. We've got a free vote. We've heard the free vote from the Labour side, and I've heard the commitments from the Lib Dems. What I can't get is anybody not voting yea or nay on it. Yeah, they will see that the balance of the power lies on the Labour side. They will see that out there. So let's hear somebody standing up. You vote for it or you vote against it. Let's stand up and stand fast. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Kenyon. And just so people know where they are, I've got Councillor Windley next, Councillor Welton and Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Local plans are to ensure that every part of the country plays its fair role providing housing for a rapidly rising population. And in spite of a current temporary blip, that rise will continue. And it has its roots in not in planning policy, recent planning policy, but in political decisions taken decades ago. And sadly, now we reap the problems of those decisions and difficult choices have to be made so that housing does not become even more unaffordable, pricing young and old out of the market. I would also just on the recent comments say the local plan is permission to apply for planning. It is absolutely not a free pass, and there are extensive requirements on any planning application and even stricter ones on the ones in the Greenbelt, and that is covered in the local plan itself. I'd like to say a bit about the examination process, as it was so key to improving the plan of the previous administration. That process, which is an independent one, started in 2018, but it only ended earlier this year following consultation on the modifications. I was there for almost every minute of the weeks of hearings of that final examination, not as a spectator, but as an active participant working to get that plan modified and protect our Greenbelt from unnecessary development, spending weeks poring over the evidence, questioning its conclusions and showing its weaknesses to the independent inspector. And as some in our audience and the public will know, as they were also there were many people doing the same, members of RAGE in Killamarsh, members of Dronfield Civic Society, members of Dronfield Town Council, our Conservative MP, and Conservative councillors from across the district. And we had very significant success. Our collective efforts reduced the Greenbelt housing from 1,275 houses to just 600, saving over half the Greenbelt that the previous administration had included in their plan. So the examination was the last time to amend that plan, not the local plan working group that was referred to, and not the council. It was beyond their remit at that point. And any councillor could have come along to that examination, including Councillor Shipman and Councillor Barker. But the examination was open to anybody, absolutely. But what I don't remember is a string of councillors from other parties coming along, sat around that table day after day. It's not rubbish, it's clearly what happened.
Councillor Kenyon, I was there most days.
Day after day.
Please retract that.
Around the
Thank
table.
you.
Yeah,
Can we
sorry.
just, I think we'll accept you were there and let's press on with
I
it.
accept Councillor
We'll
Hancock.
accept you were there and let's press on with this.
Hancock came along, yes. I concur on Councillor Hancock.
Councillor Wright, do you mind?
I've also been astonished even more by the rewriting of history that some are attempting via Facebook. It's public record who submitted motions opposing this plan, who submitted objections, written objections to the inspector, and residents know who for years was working to campaign against that local plan. But the real work of politics is huge amounts of time spent researching, thinking, discussing, understanding and making a real and considered case for change. And that is what this Conservative administration focused on throughout the last 3 years. But ultimately, we are where we are. The plan for us is both about allowing development in some limited locations in Greenbelt and about protecting everywhere else against speculative development. And I also believe that our incredibly robust challenge to the local plan left no stone unturned, including many of the ones mentioned today. I recognise we are all in a difficult position, and I fully appreciate why some councillors may vote against. But because of the need to protect all our other Greenbelt from speculative development and our other green spaces and green fields and all those bits of infill, and the need to provide some housing, I will reluctantly be supporting this plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Windley.
In response to Councillor Foster's comments, Councillors Hancock and Shipman met with Dr. Goodiston and the Save the Dronfield Greenbelt team on many occasions. We have actively worked with both the north and the south of the district to try and resolve this situation without playing the two halves of the district against each other. This local plan fails to meet the needs of the district and I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Welton.
Thank you, Chair. Technology. Thank you, Barry. I'm speaking against the adoption of the local plan and will be voting against. I've been completely consistent from 2015, 2019, every single occasion. I've been completely consistent about voting against this local plan. Normally at the end, but it is important to me that under Rule 14.5 that my personal vote is recorded into the minutes. The reason is people in my ward and in Dronfield need to know where I stand. Like others here, I've also I've been on the streets, I've done public consultations, I've been to the inspectors, and I think I've been very consistent to this. If I'm saying what's different about Sheffield and Derbyshire to people elsewhere in the country or overseas, one of the things I say, we're unique in that we're surrounded by countryside. I lived in Birmingham for 7, 8 years, and you can go from Solihull to Dudley and see nothing but industrial estates and roads and concrete and houses. That is not the same here. And one of the reasons is our green belt is very old, 1938, second oldest in the country, 240,000 hectares. And it goes before that. Sheffield Society for Protection of Local Scenery to 1924, the Sheffield City Council started buying up land. And the reason why this is important, and one thing said that the existing local plan, the previous local plan does provide some level of weight, which is correct, is that because it's very old, it bestows a very high level of protection. Not 100%, because everything derives from planning, but a very high level of protection. And in this, I've done like other people. I've spoken to university departments, I've spoken to lawyers, I've spoken to developers, I've spoken to PLCs. So that isn't just something I've come up with myself. So I believe that the local plan will actually remove Greenbelt. It doesn't protect Greenbelt. First of all, because the existing Greenbelt sites will be built on, because the presumption then will be you build on them. So it doesn't protect Greenbelt. The second reason is that the local plan is a mechanism, an effective mechanism for taking Greenbelt out and giving it to developers or speculators for a profit. That's what it does, because otherwise it'll be very difficult. If you allow these Greenbelt incursions to go, it will encourage more developers. These are bridgeheads. Whatever comes next, there's a white paper on planning, whatever it's going to be, whether it's going to be traffic light system, whatever it's going to be, this will encourage further encroachment. It will reduce the protection. The actual existing LP is on stale. It's on 2011 census, an out-of-date settlement hierarchy review, which was flawed. We've got plenty of brownfield sites, but the world has changed. It's changed with COVID, it's changed with technology. We've seen the retail sector completely change. There are enough sites. So I think the LP will lead to increased developer pressure here and elsewhere in the district. I want to touch briefly on the neighbourhood plan. I spent 3 years with a number of Dronfield councillors, 3 years on that. It was a lot of time, and that went to a referendum that was approved by Dronfield Town Council. It was approved by the district, and it went for public consultation, and it was approved in the referendum. And part of that is the adoption of EMV1 policy, that there's a strong presumption against development on Greenbelt, and that's been adopted by all. There is very little public, not 100%, but there's very little public support for building on Greenbelt in Dronfield. I also want to draw your attention to the CEPR, the Centre for Economic and Business Research. We're one of the top 10 areas to live in the country, and one of them is the access to green spaces and the end of settlement limits, which one of the sites, my own DR3, will do. So I have not changed my opinion.
You've got half a minute left.
Okay. So in my opinion, the LP framework is not in the best interest of Dronfield residents, Dronfield Woodhouse and Gosforth Valley, which is my ward, and I will be opposing it. Thank you.
Chair.
Councillor Welton.
Chair, can I call a recorded vote? Seconded by.
Can we just finish the? We'll come back to that.
Just so we don't skip it and you tell me we can't do it because we've gone past that.
Would I? Councillor Brian Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Not a lot, just endorse the fact that I am, always have been and always will be against building and development in the green belt. And just the other thing is that I would like to have my vote recorded personally under Rule 14.5. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? You've spoken, Councillor Lacey. No. So we've got a request for recorded vote. Is that supported by Councillor Hancock? Need a third one, Councillor Windley. So that's it. We have a recorded vote. I'm going to turn now to Councillor Cupit to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, couldn't get my mask off. Thank you for, I think, what has been quite an interesting debate, and I appreciate it's a passionate debate, and I welcome the fact that we have all set out our views. To try and cover as many of the queries as I can before my pen ran out. The local plan steering group wouldn't have changed things, Councillor Barker, because there was nothing left to steer, and I do, because we were in the legal process, and I do contest the point that several Labour colleagues have made that you didn't set the strategy, because you did, although I do fully appreciate the work that officers have done back then and now and throughout this process, and I sort of acknowledge that and thank them for that. We didn't start this process. If we had, I genuinely believe we would be in a different place. Politics and planning, as I said at the start, does require hard decisions, and I think that's what we've seen from today's debate, and that's what residents have to trust us to do. We can't shy away from that difficult decision, but I would like to reiterate, in contrast to what some members have said about the opportunity to amend, that was not an option. We've done a lot of work on this over the last 2 years, and because we'd received the inspector's report, to try and make changes, we'd have had to declare and prove the set plan unsound, which by itself withdraws you from the examination, and then we'd have had to meet the stages or principles of modifications, not to take too long and for them to be a modification, which again, because of the evidence base, we couldn't have done. So amendment was not an option. It was a for or against, and it is a for or against today. As I've said, for members in Dronfield and Killamarsh, I recognise the points that have been made and the different stances that may be taken. But for members representing wards in the south or the west, I want to just reiterate what happens without an adopted plan. Councillor Shipman and Councillor Hancock have said that you could sub out sites, but that shows a fundamental misunderstanding, and it is also misleading residents, as your own favourite phrase, and trying to political point score on an issue. I appreciate nobody can answer me now, but given the intended stance, particularly of the Lib Dem group, I'd like you to think how you're going to explain to residents in the south that you signed up for there to be no settlement development limits separating Wingworth, Tupton, Grassmore or Playcross, especially when you've used that in your own objections on Nethermore Road. And the same goes for Councillor Hancock, that same objection of settlement development limits was used in the Nethermore Road appeal, which again, I'm really pleased that we won, but that was also because we had a local plan. And just to quote that, as if that does, if you're saying that you don't think that was important to Nethermore Road, just to quote from the Dearlands Road appeal inspector, settlement development limits are meaningless if there are no up-to-date policies to support them. So it shows that it can go both ways. And as a final point, I just want to come back to some of the queries on Killamarsh that have been raised specifically. I understand the questions and concerns, and a lot of the issues that have been raised will be considered as part of the planning process, which will happen regardless of what happens with today's vote, as there's a live application on that site, particularly on KL1. I appreciate the challenges that members have raised in Killamarsh, which we've also raised with the inspector, but the answer is, again, that we've been locked into a legal process. Regarding the question about spatial strategy, I fully understand the concerns of local residents and members that this is unfair. But the problem we have is what I outlined in my opening speech and what I'll close with, is that we don't have a clean slate to start from, as we've always been in a legal process and had received the inspector's interim findings, which declare that site and the Greenbelt site sound. Now, it's a judgment for us all to make, for or against, but we have to balance that with the risk of more speculative or disproportionate growth. Yeah. So thank you, Chair. Happy to move to the vote.
Thank you. It's been proposed by Councillor Cupid, seconded by Councillor Rough. So we are now going to move to a recorded vote. So I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer for the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to read your names in reverse order. And could you please tell me if you're voting for, against, or abstaining? Councillor P. Wright.
For.
Councillor B. Wright.
Against.
Councillor Winley.
Against.
Councillor Wheelhouse.
For.
Councillor Welton.
Against.
Councillor Thacker.
For.
Councillor Tate.
Against.
Councillor Strafford Stevenson.
For.
Councillor Shipman.
Against.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
Councillor Rouse.
Abstain.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Renwick.
For.
Councillor Reader.
Against.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Potts. Councillor Platts. Councillor Pickering.
Abstain.
Councillor Parkin.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Lewis. Councillor Lacey. Councillor Kerry. Councillor Kenyon.
For.
Councillor Hutchinson.
For.
Councillor Hartshorn.
Abstain.
Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Gomez-Reaney.
For.
Councillor Fennell. Councillor M. Foster.
Against.
Councillor A. Foster.
Against.
Councillor Emmons. Not here. Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Drabble.
Against.
Councillor Dayton.
Against.
Councillor Dale.
For.
Councillor Cupid.
For.
Councillor Cornwall.
For.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Clough.
Against.
Councillor Birkin.
Abstain.
Councillor Barry.
Abstain.
Councillor Barker.
Abstain.
Councillor Armitage.
For.
And Councillor Ancliffe.
For.
So the results are as follows: 22 votes for, 16 against, 7 abstentions. So the plan is carried. Item 10, to answer any questions from members asked under Procedure Rule 9.2. No questions have been submitted. So we move to item 11, to consider motions from members under Procedure Rule number 10. And we've had one. Can we take the, we're going to take the motion first and then, yeah. Apologies. So we have one motion proposed by Councillor Shipman. Over to you, please, Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. This was off the back of the headline where the council has lost out on almost £200,000 of Section 106 money following, I believe, 2 companies going bust subsequently to them actually doing the development that we've approved based on them providing that Section 106 agreement. And I thought it's been wise for us to actually have this debate, because it's one of those things that, yes, it's a technical issue, but this is £200,000 that North East Derbyshire residents are losing, whether it's residents in Ridgeway or residents in Morton in this case, that are losing out on that affordable housing contribution or local recreation facilities. And I think that the council should take steps to try and avoid this happening in future, whether that's to lobby the government to bring in legislation to actually do something about it, whether it's council policy we can change. Perhaps that's something that the leader and the deputy leader could go ahead and make changes internally. But I do believe that we need to address this, because this is not just pocket change. This is £200,000 that we could have spent on something for local residents. So I'd like to pass this motion, and I'd also like to hear what other people think about this and ways we can take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? That's Councillor Windley.
Yeah, I'll second and reserve the right to speak later.
Thank you. So, debate then. Councillor Cornwell.
Thank you. I'm going to be supporting this motion. Section 106 monies seems to be something that seriously needs to be looked at. In North Wingfield, we had a development of 550 houses built. The serious impact was on Homewood itself, but not one penny of the money that would go to a parish council will come to Heath and Homewood. It will all go to North Wingfield, and yet all the effect is on Homewood. But the real reason I'm speaking on this development is that there's a Macefield Avenue development by Gleeson's. Now, for some reason, the monies went to county instead of district. And for several years, I've been asking, why has the money not come to district? It was accidentally given to county and has still not come back to district. And Heath and Homewood have still not seen that money. So I'm asking council to put that question in to find out where our money is.
Thank you. Councillor Renwick.
Yeah, I thank you, Councillor Shipman, for raising a valid topic. I think those who have been at planning meetings recently are aware that this is an issue that quite a number of people have raised. Particularly in Ridgeway, I have been asking about this issue for I think 3 years now. I can't support your motion simply because there's no point in chasing people in liquidation, and I don't think the Secretary of State is going to give the answer you need. I would much prefer to try and find a way around this internally, because I'm not getting the answers internally, which I think is where we need to start. So, thank you for raising it. It is important, but I don't think you've got the right motion to get the answers you need.
Councillor Cupid.
Sorry, Chair. Okay. Thank you for raising this important issue. I think it is an important debate to have, and I'm sure all members and residents will agree that money to fund infrastructure improvements in our district is incredibly important. So I do welcome the opportunity to debate it, and I take on board what you've just mentioned, Councillor Cornwall, and if you'd like to raise that with me, happy to take it up from a district perspective. Whilst I completely support what I think are the underlying aims of the motion, and I hope we all do, I can't support the wording of the motion, as I think it misses the point, misunderstands some of the basic facts, and doesn't achieve anything similar to what Councillor Rennick's just said. As a first point, both of these examples date back to the previous administration and the terms of the Section 106 agreements at the time, and so are a legacy issue we've been trying to solve and prevent. We recognise this issue, and along with Councillor Foster, as his cabinet portfolio, we've been working to put new systems in place, both from a tighter agreement, Councillor Wright, both from a tighter agreements perspective and from a monitoring angle. Indeed, there's an irony that you probably only picked up on these examples because of the improvements Councillor Foster has led on, and I'm really grateful to him for those, and I'll let you cover that in more detail. To look at the specific cases mentioned in this motion, which I've been discussing with the actual local members concerned for quite a while, for one of them, your motion is factually incorrect in stating the company's in liquidation, but it's still subject to legal action, so I can't go into that further. But to take the Morton one, this still needs to go for a formal committee or cabinet decision. But the key point to highlight is that we can still recover that money, but it would be from the residents who are now liable as landowners, which, without predetermining myself from a future vote on the way forward with it, is a significant concern. So you need to consider the consequences of what you're requesting here. As a final point, this motion is asking us to write to the Secretary of State, and it's the debate that several members have just raised about the general system, to ensure that developers and directors are forced to pay Section 106 agreements. I can clarify this is already the case, which is why we are able to take legal and enforcement action, and liquidation issues are in relation to the legal system rather than government policy. So developers are already obliged to pay Section 106s, so I'd argue it's the wider infrastructure contributions system that needs reform, which is what this government has committed to doing. And indeed, this administration has already written to the government to raise this exact issue as part of our response on the planning white paper consultation. To quote from the letter Councillor Dale and I sent in October 2020, we have several local examples where development companies have been dissolved without the Section 106 payments being made, or developments being left incomplete to avoid Section 106 payments or infrastructure improvements. This is one of the biggest frustrations to communities, particularly with regards to promises such as affordable housing allocations, which are often the biggest casualty. Consequently, there should be a greater earlier certainty on infrastructure conditions and ensuring these are delivered. So I hope the government takes note of that. So in summary, this motion is several months too late, and I'm probably being generous there, being as we sent the letter in October 2020, and doesn't really touch the surface of the work we've been doing or will continue to do in this regard. So I can't support it, but I want to reassure members and residents that along with my Conservative colleagues, we'll continue to go for action rather than words on this, and we'll keep the Chamber and specifically the Planning Committee updated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just cover the details of what we have actually done on this. Yes, the recording and collection of 106 monies could have been done better in the past. And when I was chair of audit, this is something I brought up. The committee looked at it and we put a range of improvements in place, a new traffic light system, which makes it clearer and a lot easier for the planning committee to keep track of payments, and clear demarcations and duties for the planning and legal departments to bring these monies in. So this work's already been done internally to chase these up. We're also monitoring it on a more regular basis on planning. At the minute, it's every quarter. And part of this, I think, is why Councillor Shipman's actually been able to bring this up in the first place. And because it has been brought to planning. But what I would say is there are other people that are aware that this work went on before. When I was chair of audit, we did it for quite a while. And I know Councillor Barker, I'm sure he'd back me up over there. Now, I know I've mentioned this before, so you'll have to forgive me, but it was a year till I saw you on the audit committee. That's why you don't know that this work went on. And more recent to that, the records are there if you want to check them. And more recent to that, we've now got our chair, Councillor Thacker, who's now chair of audit. At the last meeting, it was also brought up again. Now, you might have missed that as well. So these discussions have been going on in committee. They're not just discussed here at council or in the Derbyshire Times. It looks good in the Derbyshire Times, but it's a committee where the work is actually done. So these systems are in place, and that's why you've been able to spot it. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Barker.
Sorry, I wasn't going to speak, but since I've been mentioned, Don't mention him anymore. No. You've learnt your lesson there, don't mention. But yeah, we are looking at that. I mean, we looked at this in prior to the meeting and thought, well, I don't see anything wrong with this. It's going to. It's just writing a letter, and it's about really. And I accept what you're saying that you may have done it, but I don't see a problem with doing it again. It is about these developers that seem to get away with it. They build houses, they go out of business, and then they set up with a different name. And it's that sort of concept that we need to sort of challenge, I think. So I think we'll carry on and vote for it, but that's the way we are with that. And I accept the work, Mark, that we've been done in audit, and you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. You've mentioned my name, so I better speak. No. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think actually just to reiterate, because it is anything is a process of continuous improvement, isn't it? We can always keep building on it. And it is good the progress that we've made, and obviously we don't want to ever rest on our laurels with that, because there's always things we can do. As Nigel's actually just said, the key crux of this is to actually. It is writing the letter, and we do see it. And I mean, I used to be a mortgage underwriter. You know exactly what happens with these companies. They set up 15 different subsidiaries, and then they send one bust as they go along. We've all seen it happen, and we'll see it happen again and again. So we do kind of need action above our pay grade. So it is purely asking if we can get something there. I don't see another letter. A letter would hurt at all, and that's all it's actually asking for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Windley, you reserved your right to say anything you want to now. Thank you. Right. Then it's with you, Councillor Shipman, to respond.
Thank you, Chair. And I will thank Councillor Foster for the work that he has done in the Audit Committee to actually bring forward some of the monitoring aspects of this. But this goes beyond monitoring. That's the point I'm trying to make here, because it's all well and good monitoring and seeing how much they owe you. But when they go bust and there's nothing to actually claw that money back from, then what position are we left in? That's the angle that this motion is actually going at, because it's not just the monitoring, which is obviously good because you can see kind of the train coming towards you, but it's what are we going to do as a council to stop this happening again? Because obviously we've had the policies adopted from audit that you've created, Councillor Foster, but the situation has arisen even with that in place. So clearly that's not enough. And I think we need to kind of look at ourselves and what can we do better? If we can't do it better to stop this the issue arising, who do we need to get to do something to stop it? And as far as I can see, there's nothing that the district council can do itself which can stop a company going bust. But like has been mentioned, I forgot to mention it, there's another council who mentioned it, that if we can hold the businesses or the directors of those businesses to account after they go bust, then potentially there is a means to claw that money back. But that's something that will have to be done by government. And I don't see an issue with just writing a letter and explaining this conundrum that we're in as a district council to try and make that situation better. And hopefully we can make sure we have that £200,000 returned to us at some point.
Thank you. So the motion's been proposed and seconded. So we now move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show your hands. All those against? Any abstentions? That's it, then the vote has been lost. So the motion, thank you. I'm just going to take item 12 and then we can exclude the public and then have a quick comfort break at that point. So item 12, I move that the public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following item of business to avoid the disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1, 2 and 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Rough, hopefully. Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The public is excluded. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. So we'll have a comfort break of 5 minutes so that I don't think we're going to die of COVID. We're all going to die of pneumonia.